Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a huge question in world history. We're talking about how a private company, a company, that was just looking for spices somehow ended up ruling the entire Indian subcontinent. It is a wild story. So, let's jump right in. I mean, just think about that question for a second. How does a corporation with its own army take over a massive land filled with powerful kingdoms and ancient empires? It sounds almost made up, right? But the story doesn't start with cannons and armies. It starts with something much, much simpler.
You know, back in the late 15th century, European nations were absolutely obsessed with one thing: finding a direct sea route to Asia. Why? Well, to get their hands on spices. Spices were like gold back then. If you could cut out the middleman and control the spice trade, you controlled unbelievable wealth. And that obsession was about to literally change the world map. So this global scramble for profit meant that pretty soon the shores of India started to get, well, really crowded. The original players in the region were about to get some very serious and very aggressive competition.
Okay, so let's look at how this all played out. First on the scene, the Portuguese. Vasco da Gama gets there in 1498. But then, fast forward about 100 years, and boom! Suddenly everyone's there. You've got the Dutch, the British, and the French all setting up their own powerful trading companies right on the Indian coast. This wasn't just friendly competition, you know? This was a high-stakes race, and the stage was being set for a massive showdown.
And as the money started rolling in, so did the rivalries. Over time, all that competition basically boiled down to two major European powers, and both of them had ambitions that went way beyond just buying and selling goods.
So on one side, you've got the British East India Company, led by the incredibly ambitious Robert Clive, and on the other, the French East India Company, under their guy, Joseph Dupleix. Their rivalry just exploded. It turned into a series of conflicts fought on Indian soil called the Carnatic Wars. And the ultimate prize? Nothing less than total political and commercial control over India.
Well, in the end, the British came out on top. The Treaty of Paris in 1763 basically took the French out of the running. Sure, they could keep their little trading posts, but their dreams of building a French empire in India? Crushed. And that left the British East India Company as the last major European player standing.
All right, so now we get to the real turning point. We're going to look at two huge battles that completely changed the game, transforming the British East India Company from just a bunch of merchants into an actual undeniable ruling power. These next two events are the absolute core of the story.
The Battle of Plassey in 1757 it's just legendary. If you looked at it on paper, the army of the Nawab of Bengal should have wiped the floor with the company's forces. But this battle wasn't won with guns. It was won with a conspiracy. See, Robert Clive made a secret deal with the Nawab's own commander, a guy named Mir Jafar, who then betrayed his leader right there on the battlefield. The result? A shocking British victory that handed them control over the unbelievable wealth of Bengal.
So, if Plassey was a win based on sneaky political moves, the Battle of Buxar just 7 years later was a straight-up show of military force. This time, the British were up against a massive alliance of 3 huge Indian powers. We're even talking the Mughal emperor himself. And the British won, decisively. Buxar proved beyond any doubt that the company's small but highly disciplined army could beat anyone in India. There was no question anymore who had the military advantage.
And this is the final piece of the puzzle. After that huge win at Buxar, the Mughal emperor had to grant the company something called Diwani rights. Now, I know it sounds super technical, but trust me, it was an absolute game changer. What it meant was the British East India Company, a private business, remember, now had the legal right to collect taxes from millions of people and run the local government. A company was now acting as a state, controlling the money and the law.
So you have to ask, how did this even happen? How did these huge, rich, powerful Indian states fall to a foreign company from thousands of miles away? Well, it wasn't an accident. There was a clear blueprint they followed.
The British basically had a 4-step playbook. First, they exploited disunity. The Mughal Empire, once so powerful, was starting to crack, and local rulers were all fighting each other. The British used that chaos perfectly. Second, they had a powerful navy. That meant they controlled the seas, which controlled the flow of troops and money. Third, their armies might have been smaller, but they were professional, incredibly disciplined, and used the latest European tactics. And finally, they were masters of divide and rule, expertly playing one local prince against another to benefit themselves.
And the long-term impact of all this? It was massive. India's incredible wealth was now being siphoned off to fuel Britain's own industrial revolution. A lot of local Indian industries were shut down to make way for British-made goods. This wasn't just a military conquest, it was a total economic rewiring of the subcontinent, and it was the beginning of almost 200 years of British rule.
So, what's the big takeaway here? You have this commercial business, started with the simple goal of making money from spices, that just spiraled into something else entirely. Through a mix of clever diplomacy, outright deception, and of course military power, a British company turned itself into an empire, changing the course of Indian history forever. What started with a ship looking for pepper ended with a crown.